I'm good, as good as I can be today. I'm Liji. I use they, she pronouns. I grew up in Istanbul, Turkey, went to school there. After that, I sort of took a gap year, spent some time studying German intensively in Germany, and then sort of just spent the rest of the time just acclimating to being in the United States of America, because I had never really lived here for any long period of time. I was born in Portland, Maine, lived there for 3 years, and then moved like right after my 3rd birthday for my parents to teach art. Because my parents worked, I was able to not be in the Turkish public school system and was able to sort of get outside of that. I went to school with a lot of pretty wealthy, mostly international people, a lot of US consulate staff children, a lot of children of local large businesses, reps in Samsung, people like that. So socially, my high school was very similar to Skidmore, just because it was on the wealthier side. On the other hand, people were similarly academically motivated and wanted to actually pursue something and go into a career. I'm really used to, especially from being in Istanbul, obviously, just having an infinite amount of space to explore, and also the public transportation ability to just access it at a moment's notice. And so both there's many fewer going to this place for the first time, doing this for the first time, something just opened up and let's go there. That's rarely a thing that happens in this area, when it was almost a weekly occurrence in Istanbul. And similarly, stuff is nowhere near as fast-paced. People take their time to do a lot more of the things that they're doing, for better or for worse. Sometimes that can be infuriating in the ability to get down to Albany quickly. However, on the other hand, there's some things that are really nice. A lot of people spend much more time just walking places and appreciating the things that are around them without a destination in mind. And so, in some ways, it is a really nice contrast. In contrast, the city itself socially was really much grittier than a lot of, at least the area immediately around Skidmore is, especially the parts that I was spending time in. I spent a lot of time in jazz cafes and places like that when I was growing up. I also just spent a lot of time in the city, because A, it's a massive city, and B, there's just so much there because it's been so constantly settled that a lot of the time that especially I was hanging out with my friends was you just get on a bus and go somewhere, and you've never been, but it's going to be interesting. And a lot of us were artists and photographers at that, so we would just go somewhere and shoot for a while and then come back and be whoa, look at all of this gold that we found in this random neighborhood. Partially that was a family thing. The main medium that my father works in is photography, but Istanbul is also just a big photo city. There's so much photography, and people both come to document, but also there's a huge photo community there. Because it's such a large city, it has a population, I think now, of 18 million people. And because so many people sort of transiently move through, you get exposed to a really wide range of, not necessarily styles, but just perspectives in the ways that people are trying to encapsulate the city in itself, but also the communities inside of it. I don't know when I started photographing. It's been over a decade at this point. I think I got my first camera when I was 5 years old. I'm not taking photos with any intentionality or with any goal behind it, just taking photos of whatever was interesting at the time on a point and shoot. But yeah, at least for photography, I've been for basically my entire life living with a camera in my hand to some degree. That's shifted from point and shoots to I was doing a lot of work with the DSLR sort of in junior high, and then I got really into film in high school, film photography. Growing up in Istanbul definitely played a big influence on that, though, because there's so much, and there's such a huge visual diversity throughout the whole city. Going just from one neighborhood to another, they look fundamentally different, because the same, different groups of people had been living there for sometimes thousands of years. And I think that, at least for me, influenced a lot of my early photographic style. I was really into street photography for a while and would love like going around and documenting things. It's become less of my thing nowadays, but I think I still have pulled a lot from that essence just in all of my work of like really quick observational things. I tend to prefer speed and candidness over photorealism. I also was sewing a lot, but that's a mainstay. It's been a mainstay of my artistic practice for at least 5 or 6 years now. Currently, I do a lot of repair work. That's been a big interest of mine, is the act of fixing items of clothing, the act of like repairing a ripped knee, a ripped elbow, thin parts in a pair of pants, torn linings. I find that like process of very directly engaging with the maintenance and repair of items of clothing that I use and have used for long periods of time to be both very cathartic for myself as a form of ritual, but also a really interesting element of artistic practice and almost an elevation of a lot of those things beyond just their like pure functionality, but into this like relationship that I possess with each of these individual garments. Beyond that, I've been exploring much more patched clothing and the ideas of like printmaking as it meshes with that. And so I've been, over the last, I don't know, 10 or so months, really exploring the combination or the synthesis of both one side of me that's very interested in printmaking and very interested in the more like DIY ground up style of like using stencils or linoleum or even just painting, as opposed to sort of fancier, more industry-based methods of printing, screen printing, stuff like that. And I've been sort of trying to combine that with a lot of the stuff and these sort of perpetual designs and patches that I end up sewing onto my clothing and the repairs that I end up putting on as another way to add more like life or energy to a lot of those garments that's not just sort of one-dimensional, more like crazy quilt-esque designs, but actually can have more meaning beyond that that's much more explicitly stated. Printmaking for me came later than photo printing, which I think in my experience has been rarer for people, so I think that's kind of interesting. I was photo printing for a very, very, very long time. I've done cyanotypes that I made like a decade ago at least, where a lot of the printmaking I got into in the last, I think I really got into it as like a medium in 2019, and it's sort of spiraled from there. Since then, it's sort of been something that's percolated through a lot more of my work as a way to continue to work back into a lot of these pieces that are sort of somewhat finished and add another layer of depth and interest to them that's not just a single image, but is like layered and worked back into repeatedly. To reiterate my sort of classic mantra again, just make weird art, make art that makes you happy, have fun with it. There's rules exist to be broken, and you should always think about why a lot of the rules that you're following are in place.